We have a variety of things to talk about. Just an update on some of the desecrations of Catholic statues, for example, of St. Junipero Serra. This is from Catholic World Report. Cross and graves vandalized at the Catholic University Cemetery. So this is in Washington. A man has been arrested and charged with vandalism and assault after swastikas were painted on the graves of several Dominican friars, and a security guard was assaulted at a Catholic college Monday evening. A statement from Father Brian Shanley, OP, and Father Kenneth Sicard, OP, the president and president-elect of Providence College, Rhode Island, said that around 9:30 p.m., day before yesterday, public safety officers were alerted to the presence of a suspicious man at the on-campus cemetery. And by the way, I've been to this campus before. There's a big, beautiful Dominican church right across the street from it, and I had the opportunity to speak there. And so I had a chance to also visit this campus so I can visualize where they're talking about. The cemetery contains grave sites of deceased Dominican friars who have taught at the school. Officers approached the individual to question what he was doing and to confirm the vandalism when they noticed that the suspect had painted swastikas and anti-Catholic language on the cemetery's central cross and on several headstones, and was actively burning American flags that stood at some of the grave sites. This guy's got issues, wouldn't you say? I mean, he would fit right in with the mob that's doing that and much worse in all around the country. He would fit right in with them, but I would say this guy's got some serious issues. In total, 7 headstones were defaced along with the central cross in the cemetery. The man proceeded to hit the security officer in the head, another issue there, and run away. He was later discovered hiding in bushes on the campus, where he was subsequently arrested. The paint was removed the following day. Providence College says, "We loudly and unequivocally condemn this racist, anti-Semitic, and anti-Catholic action and the desecration of our gravestones of our beloved deceased Dominicans who served Providence College so well and so faithfully for so many years. In addition, we condemn this action in support and solidarity with the Jewish members of our community, many of whom enjoyed the friendship of those late Dominican friars. Providence College has a long and proud history of collaboration with the Jewish community in Rhode Island. Providence College is home to the Jewish Catholic Theological Exchange and regularly hosts events aimed at interreligious dialogue and friendship." Shanley and Sicard, the 2 priests just mentioned, said in a joint statement, "Our community embraces love and mutual respect for all people. There is no place for hatred on our campus." Providence Police Department identified the man on Tuesday as 26-year-old Kevion Gomera, who was charged with vandalism and assault with intent to commit a felony. A man who believes he encountered Gomera before the assault told local NBC affiliate WJAR that Gomera was carrying a bucket of paint and accused Providence College of being, quote, part of slave plantations. And he said he was going to light American flags on fire. Providence College was founded in 1917, several decades after the Emancipation Proclamation. Yeah, exactly. So that was 63, 73, 83, 93, 1903. Yeah, so 5 decades after the release of the Emancipation Proclamation, with nearly a century after the abolition of slavery in Rhode Island. Now, speaking of Rhode Island, there's an interesting connection here because Rhode Island is now under attack for the issue of slavery. Now, Cyrus, I believe we've got some audio on this topic, don't we? Having to do with the governor of Rhode Island, is that right? Okay, so why don't we just take a quick look at this here. This is from WPRI. Rhode Island Governor Raimondo. This is him speaking on thank you, the removal of Providence plantations from the ballot. Now, if this doesn't sound, particularly familiar, let me give you a basic update here. The question, or the situation in question here, if I could just get this document to cooperate with me, and it's not cooperating. The situation in question has to do with the history of Providence, Rhode Island. State Senator Harold Metz has introduced a resolution to hold a ballot referendum this fall on removing the words "and Providence plantations" from Rhode Island's official state name. And there's some data here in this audio that will explain this a little bit further. So let's take a listen.
You said you would favor that, but short of putting it on the ballot, would you consider an executive action to remove Providence plantations from any state buildings?
I would support, I think it should be put on the ballot this year. I have heard from so many African Americans in Rhode Island, actually particularly in the past couple of weeks as I've been really amping up my efforts to listen, that it's a painful thing to see. Like state employees, every time they get their paycheck, they have to see the word plantation. Every time you get a proclamation from the state for doing a good thing, you should feel proud about it, you have to see the word plantation. So I think we ought to do the right thing, put it on the ballot, ask the people of Rhode Island to do the right thing and change our name. I suppose if that is unsuccessful, yes, I would absolutely consider doing what you said.
Okay, this, to my mind, is not the right thing to do. What's happening here is the word plantation itself, just as a word, is offensive to some people, but it has nothing to do with slavery. So Michael Brendan Doherty, he says on Twitter, he says, this is just full-on illiteracy. Northern Ireland to soon be illegal, as even discussing it requires talking about the plantation. And so he's tying that in with Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. He says, the quote, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. He says the quote begins literally, whatever the history of the term is in Rhode Island, ... referring to people on Twitter who are saying, I don't care what this may refer to, I just don't like the word plantation. He says, in other words, they know that the word in Rhode Island isn't about agricultural slavery, but they're pretending it is to give credit for striking it. The state of Rhode Island, this is from CBS News, is moving to change its official name, the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, due to its connection to slavery. Rhode Island Governor, whom you just heard from, Gina Raimondo, signed an executive order the day before yesterday to change what appears on government documents, and the state legislature is moving forward with a bill to alter the name entirely. So they just want to strike off that last part of it. But it's the reason why they want to do it that I find problematic. Many of the state's residents, as you heard her say, find it painful that a word so closely associated with slavery should appear in the official name of the state. This is what the governor said. Well, okay, cotton is a word that is extremely closely related to the peculiar institution of slavery. Should we eliminate the word cotton? What about any of the other things? Cabins. Uncle Tom's Cabin was a famous book by Harriet Beecher Stowe, which really blew the lid off the conditions that slaves were in, that the people in the North generally didn't really know much about. I mean, they were okay with slavery, many of them. Most Northerners weren't abolitionists in the years prior to the Civil War. And so this book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, was a way of letting people know, raising consciousness, so that they would understand the plight of their black brothers and sisters who were in chains in the South. And that was really a propellant that moved the abolition movement forward. And so the slaves lived in cabins. Should we get rid of the word cabin? I mean, I think this is how silly this is. The order to shorten the name to just Rhode Island, which to me, I mean, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other. I don't care if it's called Rhode Island or Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. I mean, it doesn't affect my life at all. I just think it's wholly unnecessary. Furthermore, it is a sign of things to come. Because if somebody says, that bothers me, that offends me, now it seems because the adults have taken a back seat and they're not standing up and imposing order on the chaos, people can, with impunity, just do that if that's what they want to do. If your last name, for example, was in some way associated with slavery, maybe some famous slaveholder, and of course, as you know, they're going after George Washington, who did own slaves, by the way. He owned slaves, he bought slaves, he sold slaves. That's all true. I mentioned Ron Chernow, the author who recently issued a monumental biography of General Ulysses S. Grant. He has another one of George Washington. Powerful. I would say it's probably the magisterial biography of George Washington that's available today, cutting edge scholarship. He spends a great deal of time looking at George Washington's conflicted personality in that he did own slaves. There's no way to get around that. But if your name is Washington and that name bothers somebody, I mean, it sounds so ludicrous, but I mean, the way things are going, I could just picture somebody bringing suit against you to say, your name bothers me. And when I hear your last name, I'm thinking of slavery. Therefore, I demand that you change your last name. Ludicrous, but increasingly possible nowadays. I posted on Twitter earlier today, actually just before the show started. I said, you better, if you haven't visited Mount Rushmore, you better do it while you still can before the mob arrives and destroys it. Now, Mount Rushmore. It's a beautiful, it's a startlingly beautiful monument. If you've ever been to Rapid City, South Dakota, you go see this, and it'll take your breath away. And it symbolizes the greatness of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. By the way, a bunch of goofballs, as soon as I posted this on Twitter, they immediately started posting cartoons that are funny, I guess, about Mount Rushmore. You'll see them there. It kind of ruins the purpose of my post. But what I'm saying is that even Mount Rushmore, etched in stone, literally, it may not be there in a year or two, or even less. They may say, we don't like that anymore. We're going to get rid of it. So I don't know how you feel about things like this. The state of Rhode Island changing its name. As I say, it doesn't affect me. But this mania to tear down and destroy and efface and erase everything that bothers somebody. And let's face it, slavery is very bothersome, to put it lightly. It's a horrible thing, should not be defended, nor am I advocating that we should glorify in any way slavery. However, these people, the aforementioned presidents, Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln, they were great men in their own right. They did great things. They saved this country. Well, George Washington, he established this country in the first place. So they have merits that don't get canceled out because of the demerits of some of the things that they did. Now, Abraham Lincoln never owned slaves. Thomas or Theodore Roosevelt never owned slaves. In fact, he was a friend to black people in many ways. You heard me talk about that. For example, his friendship with Booker T. Washington and how he defied the sensibilities of the time, primarily coming from in that time. Keep in mind, this is the turn, just after the turn of the century. It was the Democrats, by and large, and somebody says, yeah, but it's not the same thing as Democrats today. Yeah, I understand that. They didn't promote abortion then. They promoted slavery. But in any case, we're talking about the political realities at that time. We're not going to import them into the modern era because they don't match up. But in any case, he took a lot of heat. I'm speaking here about Theodore Roosevelt. He took a lot of heat because he defied the mores of the time, which forbade inviting black people into the White House for dinner or meetings, taking advice from them, because this was, within living memory of the Civil War. Theodore Roosevelt was a kid when the Civil War ended. He was like 5, 6 years old. In fact, there's an interesting picture. You can Google this, a picture that was snapped of the cortege of Abraham Lincoln's funeral procession passing through, this must have been in New York City. And the photograph is of the funeral train going through the city, but it happens to capture in the background the picture, or in the picture, the home that Theodore Roosevelt grew up in. And you can see him as a little kid in the window. It's he and his brother in the window upstairs looking down as Abraham Lincoln, his body rolls by on his way to being buried. So Theodore Roosevelt, as an example, who never owned slaves, never condoned slavery, never pushed slavery. In fact, he was in many respects a great champion of black freedom. He had a living memory of the horror of slavery and the horrors of what was attempted to be the Reconstruction that spun out of control and created even more problems, such as the Jim Crow laws that lasted well into the 20th century. So all I'm saying is just take note of these things, because there is a movement afoot right now, and it's not going away. I think I said yesterday, I was, for the last, month or so, I've been kind of hoping that these people will just get tired. They'll just get worn out and need to go home and sleep for a while. And maybe they'll get distracted and go back to their video games or who knows what. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. This seems to be building. Now, people say, yeah, because there are shadowy globalist billionaires in the background who are funding them. I don't know, maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen any check stubs, but it's possible. Or are they saying, no, this is being done on purpose by the Communist Party of America? Maybe. It's all entirely possible. But whatever the background reasons are that are causing this, it's happening. So it's no joke when I say, if you haven't ever visited Mount Rushmore, you might want to go do that before it's gone. You might want to go visit some of the Civil War battlefields before they're destroyed. I mean, for that matter, how are you going to have a Civil War reenactment if you're forbidden to display the stars and bars, the battle flag of the Confederate government? How are you going to have will it just be just the North? So the Union troops will mass on one side of a field in their blue uniforms with the stars and stripes, and then who's on the other side? Nobody. We just pretend that they were never there. How do you even have a Civil War reenactment? What if Steven Spielberg, who did a really great movie about Lincoln, I don't know if you saw it, but it's quite worth seeing. What if he decides he wants to do a Civil War movie, but he's shouted down because that won't be allowed, because he won't be allowed to show Confederate soldiers, and so on and so forth. This is a dangerous movement. And as you may have kind of gotten the inkling here, it's now beginning to turn toward Christianity. It's now beginning to turn toward things like, well, you heard Sean, what's his name, yesterday, yammering on about how we have to tear down all those pictures of white Jesus and his European mother. And he doubled down and he retweeted it again. He says, yep, they all have to come down. They mean that. He really means that. I think the guy's a goofball. And it's amazing to me that people actually listen to him. Some people might say, well, it's amazing people actually listen to you. I guess maybe so. But the fact is, there are a lot of goofy ideas that are being floated around that people are latching onto and saying, yeah, heck yeah, I want to do that. And maybe it's payback time. So please take note. Take pictures of the statues around your parish. You may think I'm joking. I'm not joking, because you might come there the following weekend and they won't be there. There may be just a pile of rubble where that once was. And I'm not hoping that any of this happens. I think you can figure that out pretty well, right? I'm against all of this. I don't think we should be doing this. I want you to listen to what Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York had to say in 70 seconds. This is courtesy of the Washington Times. This is what he had to say with regard to the destruction of U.S. monuments.
President Trump mentioned in an interview that he feels cities should take further action to stop monuments from being destroyed. We saw that scene at the White House with the Andrew Jackson statue near the White House. We know, for example, Theodore Roosevelt's statue is coming down in New York City. Do you agree with the president's guidance that cities should do more to protect monuments?
Yeah, I don't even know what the president's guidance is, Savannah, frankly. Cities are making decisions. The Teddy Roosevelt statue, I think it was less about Teddy Roosevelt, but the other parts of that statue. And look, people are making a statement about equality, about community, to be against racism, against slavery. I think those are good statements. And it depends, can you overdo it? Of course you can. But in New York, I don't think we've overdone it, and I think it's a healthy expression of people saying, "Let's get some priorities here, and let's remember the sin and mistake that this nation made, and let's not celebrate it."
Okay, did you get that? He says that this tearing down of monuments is a healthy expression. Now, I agree with the governor that speaking out against racism is necessary, condemning racism, condemning slavery, that's all necessary. You'll notice, however, that there's a great deal of racism being perpetrated nowadays in the name of being against racism. I don't think I need to go too deep into that, because if you've been watching the news, you've been seeing this. This is unfolding before your very eyes. But Governor Cuomo, honestly, how is it a healthy expression for out-of-control mobs to roam wantonly in the streets and parks and cemeteries and looking for things that they just don't like anymore, and without any permission, without checking with the city council, without taking into account that these monuments very often were erected with taxpayer dollars, How is it a healthy expression for any society to permit these jackals, these feral people, to just wander aimlessly and destroy something that they decide they don't like? How is that healthy? And how does that bode well for your society in New York, not to mention for the rest of the country? Because it won't stop there. Right now, it's Civil War generals, and it's, things that can be somehow, maybe kind of, sort of, in some cases connected with slavery. Take Teddy Roosevelt, for example. Take Abraham Lincoln, for example. Outlandishly, it's outlandish. But in any case, that's what it is right now. What happens, Governor Cuomo? I know you listen to the show. I'm sure you listen to the show. 3 hours a day is all I ask, by the way. You can do the governor things, after the show is over. But since you're listening, I ask you this question. Your father, I know you love him and you're very proud of him, the late Mario Cuomo, and you are proud of what you perceive to be his achievements in government during his time in office and such. And I don't know if there are any monuments to your dad. I don't know if, maybe at his alma mater, which I think might be Fordham University. I've got to go back and double check that. But whatever monuments or honors that your father had accrued, what if things turn in the right direction, in the positive direction, let's say in the next 20 years, and this country becomes fully pro-life and united against the tyranny of abortion on demand? Let's just say, I'm hypothesizing, Governor. Just follow me on this one. What if in 20 years' time, maybe there's a miracle, maybe the Immaculate Heart of Mary will have triumphed by then, and there's this massive conversion to being against abortion, and people start tearing down statues of your dad, the late Mario Cuomo? Would that be, in your view, a healthy expression? Because they say he was a juggernaut of political force and action behind promoting abortion. Therefore, anything associated with that guy, we're going to tear it down. I have a feeling, Governor Cuomo, you probably would be against that. And you might even argue something like, well, okay, but my dad did a bunch of other really good things. Now, I know, Governor, that you are, up to the hilt in your own commitment to abortion, so I suppose maybe it would be a somewhat different conversation. But the main thing is, I think you can see that just because it's convenient right now to allow these feral people to roam around and just tear down any monument that they want to tear down because it offends them, I'm sure you realize this is heading somewhere. And it's not going to just play out where they say, oh, okay, we got all the statues. Let's go home. Let's get back to gaming. That's not going to happen. Just game this out a few moves and ask yourself, what will be the next set of targets? And then the next set of targets. And then the next set of targets. And by the way, they won't all be inanimate objects like statues. Down the road, the targets will be living people. You can be sure of it. That's the direction things are headed in. We've got to stop this.
For more of The Patrick Madrid Show, visit relevantradio.com/Patrick.